What is up? Welcome to week 17 in the NFL and week 17 of the DFS Academy. Your fantasy season might be over, but the DFS season does not end for a very long time. We had the Christmas slate. Now we have the main slate. Because of the Christmas slate, the main slate, very small, not the most appealing, but there are still some good plays out there, and we're going to help you find them. Let's get into it. What is up? Good morning or afternoon, whenever you happen to be watching the show, and welcome to the DFS Academy from Club Fantasy. This is our weekly DFS show. I am your host, Ryan Weiss. With me, as always, Austin Amendolia. Austin, we got together last night, recorded the Christmas special. This episode will be airing after Christmas, so I hope you had a great holiday.
Yeah, I hope I had a great holiday too, honestly.
Yeah.
I am excited for week 17, sort of. I'm so intrigued how this is going to go. We're recording on a Tuesday, which is your reminder already to join the Discord.
Yes.
But there are 9 games on the main slate. We have not had a slate that small
Since
all
the
year long.
Bipocalypse, I think.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. It was hard to find really compelling games this week as well.
Yeah. I had mentioned in a previous intro, and I stick with this, week 18 is probably the most fun show that you and I get to do because we get to pull names out of the hat that we haven't pulled out in ages. Week 17 is bordering on that simply because of the smallness of the slate. And as you mentioned, not the best matchups falling to Sunday. And honestly, we spent the entire Christmas show talking about how it wasn't great matchups. So week 17, just not a great week. So I'm glad I'm not in the championship. I'm not. I want to be in the championship. Anyway, as I mentioned, the show will continue to go on. As I mentioned, it's a very small main slate, but there are some really, really nice plays. If you've never tuned into the show before, we break it down into cash plays and then tournament plays. We start the show with cash. We end the show with tournament. If you've never played DFS before, you are able to actually play with us. There are links in the description of this video where we run $2 contests on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm telling you, if you want to win a couple of extra bucks every week, jump over on FanDuel. Not enough people are playing. I keep winning. I'm a very easy mark. You can beat me. Jump into that FanDuel contest. Not enough people are playing over there. But Austin, you hit the most perfect nail on the most perfect head. You and I, complain sometimes, and I use complain loosely, about having to record on Thursdays just because it works best with our schedule. Well, with this holiday, we're recording this on a Tuesday. So a lot of our information is from a 10,000-foot level. They need to join the Discord. Let them know about that.
Yeah, so we have a listener Discord. You can follow the link in the show description to join that. We will talk DFS. We also talk every other format of fantasy football you can think of, dynasty, redraft, etc. But for the show, we talk DFS. I will be dropping my cash lineup in there every Sunday morning, which, by the way, that cash lineup did cash this week. So another reason to join it, but also will help you set your lineups. We can get more questions in there, which has been really fun. And then ultimately, we get to celebrate our wins and losses, including Ryan. You apparently had a pretty decent week last week.
Yeah. I switched my method a few weeks ago where I got out of the Millionaire. I was tired of donating to everybody. And I started playing in their $3 single entry contest. So again, I am not a big DFS gambler. I want to be very upfront about that. So I started playing in their $3 single entry. At one point, Austin, in their $40,000 contest, which I believe is like a 20,000 person contest, I was in the top 100 and was like bringing in 250, but I had a 1 o'clock heavy lineup. The 4 o'clock games kind of got to me a little bit. But I did cash. I finished in the top, I think 1,000 of every contest I entered, which doesn't sound like much, but honestly, Austin, this season has made me a better DFS player via talking with you every week. I don't mind saying that. I've gotten better about what contest I'm playing in. I've gotten better with bankroll management, all because of this show. So hopefully we've helped some other folks out there. If you are in the Discord and you have wins, drop them. We will talk about them. But Austin, you and I both shared our cash, and Joel shared his cash. And I imagine with the similarities between our three, I think every one of those probably cashed this week. But I had some success in tournaments as well. Someone else who had success in tournaments, is last week's Millie Maker. Not a listener of ours, or maybe they are, and they just didn't tell us, though, based on this lineup. Not a listener of ours. I've seen some weird Millie making lineups. This is the weirdest Millie making lineup. Plain and simple. No denying it. They scored 218 points, which is relatively average for what we've seen this season. Justin Herbert at quarterback, James Cook, Chase Brown. So far, everything makes sense. Justin Herbert should have been a starter for many leagues, including my own. Had that great matchup with Dallas, took advantage. Because they went Justin Herbert, they also stacked with Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen disappointed, but when you hit on every other spot of your lineup, it doesn't matter, because they hit on Chris Olave, Austin, who was one of our favorite plays from last week, Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, and the Raiders defense. So first and foremost, they started the cheapest defense and they won $1 million. That would normally bring a smile to my face. But that also defense scored 1 point. It was just but this kind of goes to my point, Austin. It's what you get the ability to do with the top 8 of your lineup by using the cheapest defense.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because it wasn't easy to get both James Cook and Chase Brown into your lineup. They weren't exactly cheap last week. I love that in our show last week, we talked about play a Justin Herbert stack. Let's stack Herbert and Keenan Allen. And it was correct, technically speaking, but yeah, Keenan Allen comes away with 9.4 fantasy points. I'm pretty sure Lad McConkey outscored him too. He was still the worst pass receiver for the Chargers this past week. The thing that really, to your point, the thing that really surprised me about this was attacking the Raiders so heavily in general on this, getting the defense, Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty. I mean, that's what we hoped to have been doing at the beginning of the season. But at week 16, I was not thinking that this was a viable strategy.
And against Houston, I'll take nothing away from starting the 3 Raiders. This sounds so stupid that I'm yelling at a millionaire. This was the worst week to do this, and it just worked. So my notes, I'm going to read my notes word for word. 3 Raiders makes this a nonsense build that won $1 million. There is nothing to learn here for the second week in a row. Austin, the one thing I did want to talk about, and something I think we can learn from this lineup, though, we were in on the Dallas Chargers game. We were in on both sides of this game. They decided to go no bring back, which I think is an interesting strategy. Sometimes you just need to be right about a team and not right about a game, because George Pickens would have put this lineup to the moon. I don't know, looking at it, where they would have fit him in, but
yeah, no, I think that's really true. If you have a strong stance on what team is going to pop off, in this case, you think Chargers are going to perform better than the Cowboys, it can help you differentiate that way. And I do wonder to what extent this person plugged in the first 5 players of their lineup in Herbert, Cook, Brown, Olave, QJ, I guess 6, Allen, and then just saw what was left and kind of went from there. And that's how you land on Bowers, Genty, and the Raiders. Defense is just saying that's what works from a salary perspective. But yeah, to your point, you didn't have to force the bring back on this. And while it is still a really solid DFS principle, in these larger contests, especially in a 150 max center, the Millie Maker, you might have a version of this where you did have that Dallas Cowboys bring back, but then a different version where you don't.
Yep. Austin, before we get into cash, I'm going to throw one more thing out there, because we talked about my winning last week, and I did do well last week. And I'm not going to not talk my crap that I do most weeks, because Austin, on this show last week, I mentioned that Joe Burrow was my favorite tournament quarterback. And I actually said he's going to go for 304. And he literally went for 309 and 4. So shout out to Joe Burrow for making me look really smart, to all the folks who watched last week. Austin, one of our other favorite plays last week was Chris Olave. And I am just reading your bullet point in your cash. So I'm going to let you go into cash here. I am shocked by this number. So.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I'm so shocked by this as well. So I went 60% in head-to-heads last week. I doubled up in my cash contest. So it was a good cash week for me. The thing that surprised me the most about this was Chris Olave was under 10% rostered this week in cash in that $10 double up. I don't understand what was happening there, because we talked about it last week. Devon Bailey had opened up targets. Now, I think that maybe there was a case to play Juwan Johnson, but Juwan Johnson wasn't super highly rostered. Instead, it was actually Harold Fannin that got steamed up at tight end. You could have maybe punted further, but I didn't really see anybody punting further at New Orleans. So him being under 10% rostered and scoring me 40% points, it functioned like a tournament lineup for me because I was able to differentiate so heavily from the field, especially because people went in heavily on DK Metcalf, who I did play. He was 70% rostered, and Xavier Worthy, who was over 50% rostered, and they just didn't get there. Now, Metcalf, I think it was a smart play, and I think it was chalky enough. It was fine. Worthy was an interesting one. I don't think I really ever contemplated playing the Kansas City Chiefs in cash last week. I was like, I'll play them in tournaments because
I had Worthy in one of my tournament lineups. So
because I thought, if Gardner Minshew like does have a one of his like pop games that he's able to have, like I could see a world where he and Xavier Worthy are really good, and then you've saved a lot of money. But in cash, I was surprised to see Worthy so heavily rostered, and he dudded, and it ended up, I think, costing a lot of people.
Yeah, it's one of those things where seeing Olave at 10 and Worthy at 52, and obviously there was a massive price difference. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. DK Metcalf makes a little bit more sense, but interesting game for him as well that cost him the next two games. That'll actually come up a little bit later in the show. So that wraps up our week 16 discussion. It's time to talk week 17. And as I mentioned, we start off with cash plays. This is Austin's specialty. This is where you are going to build your bankroll. We break these down by price points. So Austin, we kick the show off with top of the class. And I have to say, maybe it's because he's been in prime time so much this season. This might be the first time you've named this player.
Yeah, it's been a minute at least. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba at $8,600 on DraftKings. He's kind of the only player I'm looking at in this price range because I don't know that you're going to be able to get multiple of the really elite options this week. It's going to be hard to me to find punt options. So I'm being a little bit choosy about where I'm spinning up. But
yeah,
JSN, I mean, he just continues to get ridiculous levels of volume. And going up against the Carolina Panthers, they can be had on their secondary. They've allowed the 7th most points to the position since week 13. So I feel really comfortable kind of attacking them. I could see the Panthers being a little bit frisky here, but just most importantly, like, Jason's getting the volume week over week, and in a week where there's only 9 games on the slate, like I want to make sure that whoever I think the best play is in my lineup, because I think that's going to be just like even more important this week. We talked about it a little bit with the Christmas slate, but as the number of games gets reduced, the amount of chalk and rostership towards the best plays goes up. And so I really just want to focus on, let me get the best players in my lineup, and JSN is top of the list for me on that one.
Yeah, I think that's such a great call, and I think that might be the best tip we're going to give on this show in cash, is there are 9 games. You have to decide which 2 players are going to score the most and be the most heavily rostered, and they have to be in your lineup. So,
yeah, there you go.
All right, we're moving on to the band nerds. These are the ones who spend a little bit too much time on their instruments to make it to the top of the class. We're talking $6,000 to $8,000, the mid-tier players over on DraftKings. Some very familiar names here, Austin, one of which fantasy managers may be terrified of right now.
Yeah, I mean, so first off, there's Trey McBride, who is $7,500 on DraftKings. He is incredibly expensive. And it's like I mentioned, it's going to be challenging to play both JSN and Trey McBride. So I don't know that I'm going to have a lot of Trey McBride this week, at least in cash. I probably will end up saving at tight end, but the matchup is really, really good. He's going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about the Bengals have gotten smashed by opposing tight ends consistently over the past several weeks. They let Kyle Pitts get into the ends, or not Kyle Pitts, that was the Cardinals. They've been giving it up to tight ends all season long. And Trey McBride, he just continues to get the ridiculous levels of volume. Cincinnati's allowing 21 points per game over the past 4 weeks. It makes sense. It's just about the salary consideration. And I think that will be the biggest barrier to playing him in a cash lineup.
Yeah, you're right about the salary. At least it went down after last week. At least they caught up and said, oh, he had a bad game. We'll get him back below $8,000. I guess that's the one saving grace of what happened last week. So
yeah, I guess so. But also in this price range, I have Chase Brown at the running back position at $7,400. Now, I think last week was like the ceiling for Chase Brown, clearly.
Oh, certainly.
And I'm not expecting him to just rinse and repeat, right? He got lucky. Well, lucky. He scored many touchdowns, and touchdowns are hard to predict week over week. And so part of the reason he popped for 30, 40 points last week is because of 3 touchdowns, but he's been getting really good usage anyways. He's been getting at least 15 touches per game. He's been getting right around 20 DraftKings points, even before last week. So I like it. He's getting enough volume and he's been consistent enough. And on the flip side, Arizona Cardinals have been giving it up to running backs. Like they were getting gashed by Bijan Robinson at times last week. So it's a good situation for Chase Brown. I don't know that he necessarily hits that same ceiling again, but we just saw the potential, and there's really not reason to think that he's gonna like completely fall back to earth this week.
Yeah, completely with you. He feels like a much better cash play than a tournament play this week, because I think we did see that tournament ceiling last week.
Yeah. And then probably the player you're most nervous about in this category is Jalen
Trey McBride is the player I'm most nervous about.
That's fair. At that price point, it is hard to stomach. Jalen Waddle, though, is an interesting play for me this week at $6,100. And it's simply just because Quinn Ewers was targeting him. Like we saw that he was still getting really good volume. This past week, he got 9 targets in the first start. And I think like because of the fact that they're starting Ewers, we talked about this last week, like the Dolphins have something to play for in terms of they need to see what they have in Ewers, and they want to get some momentum going into next year. So I think they're going to still try and stay competitive, and Waddle will stay involved as part of that.
Yeah. Waddle's giving lightweight Chris Olave vibes this week because it's the price is almost exactly the same. And we've now seen a week of Ewers, but more importantly, now Ewers has a game under his belt. So he's going to come into this a lot more comfortable, and it's still a decent matchup for Miami. So
yeah. And we actually won't talk about this in the tournament section of the show, but I do think Waddle is an interesting tournament play for this very same reason, alluding to Chris Olave. Like these players that are getting really good volume, if all they need to do is cash in on some touchdowns, and then suddenly they're shooting up the board, and at a cheaper price than Chris Olave was last week, Waddle could be a really interesting upside play as well.
There we go. Let's move on to the value plays. We call them the bookworms. Easily underestimated, but watch out. They are sharp. Austin, you break this one down by position because this is where a lot of your lineup is coming from, the $4,000 to $6,000 range over on DraftKings.
Yeah, so first off, at quarterback, I'm just going back to Jacoby Brissett this week. I've decided that, and probably for the rest of the year, unless he does again this week, I'm just going to play Jacoby Brissett, unless he's above 6K as well. If he gets more expensive, then maybe I'll look elsewhere. But in a slate where there are some nasty quarterbacks at play, like we talked last week, maybe you could play Quinn Ewers. I'm not quite ready to do that yet. He did score 8 points, so he doubled his salary last week. So worse things could have happened, but still not terribly excited to go there. I'm not really feeling Tyler Shuck or Jackson Dart this week. I think they're decent plays, but they're not that much cheaper than Jacoby Brissett. And so I'm like, I'll just pay it for Brissett. I'm not ready to trust Shadur Sanders against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not playing Phillip Rivers. It's just like the options that are cheaper than Jacoby Brissett are really gross. And so if I'm not paying up for like a Josh Allen or Drake May in this situation, Jacoby Brissett is probably the only other quarterback I'm looking at.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to be scared off by how poorly he played against Atlanta. And I've been telling people Cincinnati's played better. Cincinnati is not playing as well as Atlanta. I think Jacoby Brissett and Trey McBride are in for a bounce back this week.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, Atlanta, they have this interesting thing too, where they can get really hot and start putting pressure on the quarterback. And so I feel like they're just like a way more volatile defense. And so you can see these really good performances where they shut down someone like Jacoby Brissett, but then you can see them get gashed by Jonathan Taylor. And I think Cincinnati is not volatile. They're going to be bad.
Yeah, we don't do a lot of analysis on the show, but I was heavily invested in that game for my fantasy championship, our semifinals. And so I got to watch. Atlanta was very smart about what they did. And putting it bluntly, the Bengals don't have the personnel to do this. They blanketed Trey McBride. And they were at the advantage that Marvin Harrison wasn't at full strength. So they essentially said, Michael Wilson needs to beat us. And Michael Wilson scored the first touchdown of the game and didn't do much else. And then
it was a fluky-ass touchdown.
That was crazy too. But more importantly, they got after Jacoby Brissett. You and I have talked about this off air many times. Atlanta was the worst QB pressure and sack team in the NFL last year. They went out and drafted 2 edge rushers, and they are one of the best, if not the best, one of the best sack teams in the NFL this season. It's incredible. So
yeah, it's absolutely wild. But at the running back position. First off, I'm looking at Ramondre Stevenson. If Travion Henderson sits, I think whoever is the starting running back for New England this week is in a really good spot. But Ramondre, he's going to be cheaper than Stevenson. And so if Stevenson sits, which it's going to be interesting. So again, we're recording this on Tuesday. The news report that I had read was talking about how Travion Henderson went out with a head injury, but the team did not confirm that he had a concussion. And so it's not clear to me to what extent Travion Henderson is in the concussion protocol at the time of this recording of the show. If he is in the concussion protocol at all, I assume Ramondre Stevenson is going to play. Since the NFL upped its standards around the concussion protocol, it has been very rare for a player to exit 1 week with a concussion and then come back in the game next week. So keep an eye out on that to see how that progresses. But I think Ramondre Stevenson is in a really good spot. Another name that I think people should be thinking about this week is Tyrone Tracy at $5,400 on DraftKings, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, who allowed the 8th most points to the running back position since week 13. And Tracy's gotten really good volume. He is splitting some carries with Devin Singletary. I'm still fine with that. I think Tracy is still the lead back, and he's going to be the one. If he scores a touchdown at this price, won't be fine. I mean, he had about 10 fantasy points this past week, so that's almost doubling his salary already, and he didn't even score a touchdown.
Yeah, and Tracy's the one of these two backs who has something to still prove. Tracy is a late round draft pick who is supplanted by Cam Scatabo. He's just benefiting from the injury right now. Tyrone Tracy is playing for a second contract, a second job, a lot of different things right now. He's the one of these backs that has motivation in a solid matchup. So
yeah, exactly. Now, at the wide receiver position, DraftKings, we need to talk. I don't understand how Jacoby Myers is $5,300 this week. I'll
take it.
Yes, put him in your lineup. Like, that was the other thing last week is I put him in my lineup last week, and he was actually fairly low rostered, and like he only scored 8.6 points, but he was only $5,500, so it didn't kill me. And I played Chris Olave, so like it all worked out. But I could see a world where if last week you had played Myers, Xavier, Worthy, and DK Metcalf, you ended up missing the cash line. But it's just like at $5,300, he doesn't need to do that much. He's still getting most of the targets. Yeah, Parker Washington beat him for targets this past week, but like overall, it's Jacoby Myers. Let's also keep in mind that was against the Denver Broncos. And I think at some point the Broncos were like, hey, we need Jacoby Myers to not beat us because he is the best receiver for them right now. And then that's how Parker Washington pops off.
The most surprising part of that game, Austin, I was able to catch bits and pieces of that game. Patrick Surtain traveled with Jacoby Myers.
Yeah.
They decided not to put Surtain on Brian Thomas, which was my expectation. He didn't cover Myers the entire game. But the fact of the matter is, the slot wide receiver in this offense carries a ton of value. And when the best corner in the league shuts down your best slot wide receiver, it's not surprising to me the second slot wide receiver goes off. Like that's kind of going to the script. You just didn't expect to see that happen. So.
Yeah, exactly. Now, next at receiver, I have Wan'Dale Robinson at $5,700. Now, last week was rough for the New York Giants in general. We talked about this on the Christmas DFS slate. At some point during this game, we looked up, and it was like I should have looked back before we recorded this, but either like late in this second quarter or early in the first half, I looked up, and Jackson Dart was 2 for 5.
I'm pretty sure it is early in the second half that happened to you, because I don't think he completed his first pass till the second half, but at the very most, he did not complete his first pass until very late in the second quarter. So
it is just absolutely wild how little pass volume they got in. Like, let alone the fact that he wasn't completing stuff. The fact that he just straight up wasn't passing the ball that much at all is the thing that surprised me the most about that. So whatever you think about the New York Giants pass game from this past week, just throw it out the window. Wan'Dale Robinson over the past, over the 5 or 6 games before last week, he had a 10 target game, an 8 target game, 14, 9, 11, and 11. Like, he has been getting really, really good volume overall. Yeah, it wasn't great last week because there was just no volume to go around. But I'm saying even last week when Jackson Dart only attempted 13 passes. Wow. Wan'Dale Robinson got 6 of those.
That was an NFL game not affected by weather, folks. Just keep that in mind. That's Strange.
That is just a wild stat. Anyways,
Yeah.
so Wan'Dale Robinson, very comfortable with him. I'm also comfortable going with Adonai Mitchell this week as a salary saving option at $4,500. He's also been getting really good volume over the past 5 weeks. He's had games of 6, 10, 6, 12, and 7 targets. So it's been a little bit up and down, but it's been consistent enough at his price point that I think you can just go right back there.
Yeah, I don't have any pushback on any of those wide receivers. I love Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm not going to let one game terrify me off of him. And then you wrap it up with one of my favorite tight ends. So.
Yeah, so Juwan Johnson is a really interesting play at tight end for me this week. He's at $4,200 on DraftKings, and it's essentially like after last week, DraftKings finally said enough of Chris Olave.
Yeah,
we're pricing him up. He is now $7,200 on DraftKings. That's a lot for me to buy into Tyler Shutt, keeping him going. Now, I think he's still a reasonable play because he can get there on volume. I think the question you then run into is, are you getting him in your lineup, or are you paying up for JSN? And if you're trying to get both of those guys, where are you punting? And we'll talk about this. Like, there's not a lot of punt options I feel really good about this week. And so because of that, I'm a little bit more interested in going towards Juwan Johnson, who in that same game caught 8 catches on 9 targets for 89 yards. Like, he also, with no Devon Bailey, is getting a lot of volume. And so I feel really comfortable going that route. And the other thing is, if you're not playing Chris Olave, if you are playing Chris Olave, there's a good chance you're not also playing Juwan Johnson because you might be concerned about that. So you could play Darren Waller, who had 5 targets last week and has a really good matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You could play Brenton Strange. I don't love those as cash plays because I think people are going to prefer to play Harold Fannin again. Harold Fannin's up at 5K. So it's like, it becomes like a lineup question. And like, how are you balancing your salaries? And so for that reason, I prefer to go with Juwan Johnson, but I totally understand playing Chris Olave this week and just not worrying about it.
Yeah, with Vele going to the IR, as you mentioned, Juwan Johnson instantly became the wide receiver 2 on this team. He has a chemistry with Shuck going back to their college days, and he just feels like a very safe play to end this season.
Yeah, there you go.
And we wrap the cash portion up with my favorite category, C's get degrees. We are talking about the punt plays of the week, less than $4,000 in Austin. You give another lesser known wide receiver, but I remember who this guy plays for, and it happens to be from the same team from last week.
So side note, I just went on a tangent to distract myself about this New York Giants question. And then indeed, you're correct. At the end of the first half, Jackson Dart was 1 for 4.
There you go. I was going to say, I knew it was something wild that he didn't throw a pass in the first quarter. So all 4 of those passes came in the second quarter. He didn't complete a pass until late. And then, as you mentioned, he was 2 of 5 in the second half. So.
Yeah, wild. He would have been 1 for 5, but there were offsetting penalties at one point. Anyways,
of course there were.
You set me up so well, and I just went off on a tangent. But
I love that.
To your point, Mason Tipton is $3,500 on DraftKings. He plays for the New Orleans Saints, and he is essentially the backup to Devon Bailey. If you are looking for a really cheap punt option, I think he is viable. I called out, I think, Kevin Austin last week because I was like, oh yeah, he was the one that stepped up when Bailey went out. Well, Tipton ended up getting more targets last week. He ended up with 5 targets and at $3,500. That's totally fine. I don't know that I need to play him in my lineup, but again, if you're trying to pay up for JSN and Chris Olave or JSN and Trey McBride, then you probably do need Mason Tipton. And in that case, because Tipton's so cheap, I don't mind playing both him and Olave in a lineup. I feel a little bit more nervous about doing Olave and Johnson.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As we move on to your defensive pick of the week, I want to give a shout out to our friend and founder, Josh Hudson, who called out the Tennessee defense in the DFS Discord, and the Tennessee defense popped last week. And they're not that much more expensive this week. Austin, the Titans and the Saints, who happen to be playing each other, this just clicked for me, have impressed the hell out of me in this last month. They have nothing to play for, but they have rallied around their rookie quarterbacks, and that includes on the defensive side of the ball, and they are playing like they are still in playoff contention, and that is very important when it comes to choosing your cheap DFS defenses.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the Tennessee Titans, they have haven't scored negative points since week 8, which is pretty impressive given how bad this team has been at
Yeah.
different points of the season. And they've had several games with multiple sacks. And in fact, they have recorded a sack in all but one game this year, and they have recorded at least two sacks in 5 of their last 6 games. This is actually kind of wild looking more at the numbers on this one. So they've played 15 games so far this year. They only have 4 games with 1 or fewer sacks. Like, they have been able to get after the quarterback despite being a little bit lackluster elsewhere.
Well, they have Justin Simmons. They have another good defensive lineman whose name leaves me right now. And then they discovered this linebacker in like the 6th round. I think his name's Cedric Gray. He has played very well this season. Like, that defense, they could turn this team around really quickly if Cam Ward grows in his 2nd year. So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Get them some pass catchers, and you could really, and an offensive line, you could really get some places. But yeah, I don't mind playing them this week at $2,800 and going up against the New Orleans Saints. Like, yeah, Shuck has been good, but I also think like he can be had in different ways, and I don't think he's gonna like put up 35 points and cause the Titans to like have -4 DraftKings points for you this week. I feel like the Titans will keep this competitive and give you enough points to just be a spot filler in your lineup.
And there's something to be said, and the Jets were never going to be a team to take advantage of this. There's something to be said that the Saints have next to no running game right now outside of Taysom Hill. And so the Tennessee is really going to be able to pin their ears back and focus on the quarterback, which I think is going to be important for them in this game. So,
no, I think that's a really great point.
Yeah.
It also makes me want to look at Taysom Hill and be like, wait, I should have like contemplated. I saw he was getting a ton of touches last week. I mean, he did get 16 points last week.
The biggest debate on Taysom Hill is why did he get those touches last week? Our good friend Hoove, huge fan of the New Orleans Saints, pointed out it is the last home game for Cam Jordan and Taysom Hill. And so they had friends and family and everybody there because the concession is that they are very likely retiring at the end of the season.
Yeah. So
now going on the road to Tennessee, do they still see that kind of volume specifically for Taysom Hill, not Cam Jordan? Nobody cares about defense here. Will they still use Taysom Hill? My thing is I feel like they felt like they unlocked something last week. And so I don't see why they're going to go away from that all of a sudden.
So I think that makes Taysom Hill actually an interesting tournament play.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that a lineup with Taysom Hill in tournaments at your tight end spot is not a bad idea. And that brings us perfectly to the tourney talk. That wraps up cash. That's how you're going to build your bankroll. Now it's about trying to win $1 million. I'll remind you, you can play in a very small tournament with us here at Club Fantasy. A lot of our writers, a lot of our viewers jump into these contests. They are $2 contests on FanDuel and DraftKings. Look for the link in the description of this video. For this section, I get a little bit more involved. We break these down by position. Austin, you start us off with 2 quarterbacks, the least surprising quarterbacks you could possibly name here, but sometimes that makes them the right play because people may not want to pay up for them. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I'm approaching this week so far, early in the week. But I'm thinking about going after either Josh Allen or Drake May at the quarterback spot this week. They are the 2 most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. Josh Allen's at $7K. Drake May is at $6,800, just a little bit cheaper. And I think both of them, the issue that I have this week at quarterback is what we alluded to earlier. There's only 9 games on this slate, and a lot of them are really kind of gross game environments. Like, there's not a ton of games that I'm like excited about. So just for like a quick overview of the slate context, the Cincinnati Arizona game is at a 53.5 over under. The next game on this slate is the Tampa Bay Miami game at 46.5. So it's a full touchdown swing between the first and second total lines on this slate, and then it kind of goes from there. And there are several games on this slate that are under 40 points as the over under right now. So it's not really a good slate context. And so for that reason, I'm inclined to say, well, maybe Josh Allen, like, playing against the Philadelphia Eagles in a situation where like they still need wins. Like, it's not smooth sailing for the Buffalo Bills the rest of the way. He might try and take over this game, get multiple rushing touchdowns, and he could easily just bury other people on the slate. And so I kind of want to lean that direction. And Drake May, in a similar vein, like
A similar
the
situation.
Patriots are in contention. Like they could be the number 1 seed in the AFC if things fall the right way. And so they have a lot to play for, and he will continue to carry that team. So to me, it's about that. And I think that some people will want to find ways to play weird quarterbacks because it's a weird slate or to save money. And I think just playing the best quarterbacks in this context could be a really easy way to just bury other people and shoot up the board.
Yeah, and I'll just continue along that same vein. You want to talk about a team that still has a ton to play for, and that is what you need to be focusing on these later in the year slates, folks. With those same 2 quarterbacks in that same conference, Trevor Lawrence might be the hottest quarterback in fantasy football right now. Back-to-back, I believe, weeks is the QB1 in fantasy, which you could have given me 1,000 guesses if that was ever going to happen, and I would have been wrong every time. He has come alive, Austin, and he's in an awkward situation for fantasy managers who don't play DFS because he is spreading the ball around to everyone. Well, in DFS, guess what? You can go into a $1 contest and build lineups with all those wide receivers with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, and it can work out really well for you. Austin, the addition of Jacoby Myers and the utilization of the slot wide receiver has unlocked this offense for Trevor Lawrence. And while it's harder to pick which target of his you want to value, it's all working out great for Trevor Lawrence. And that's why I'm leaning on him this week. It's a must-win game because they're all kind of must-win games. But the fact of the matter is it's also a great matchup. That brings me to my final point. $6,100 on DraftKings. If I remember correctly, he's the 5th or 6th highest price on the slate. That's far too cheap for Trevor Lawrence right now. Like, plain and simple, he gets Indianapolis, who just gave up multiple touchdowns. I think the best game of Brock Purdy's year to Brock Purdy last night.
Gashed by the 49ers.
And so the fact of the matter is Trevor Lawrence is coming into this game red hot, and he's the 6th most expensive quarterback on the slate. My concern, Austin, is obviously that he's chalk, but I'm hoping you're right. People are going to try to get weird, and they're going to be like, he can't do it 3 weeks in a row, and I fully believe he can do it 3 weeks in a row. So.
Oh, yeah. I think that he is playing really good football right now, and so it is totally worth continuing to lean into him. And I mean, to your point, I'm going to see if I can see the number of plays that the 49ers ran last night, because I was watching just the box score of that on like Gamecast, and I swear play after play, it was like 7-yard gain, 12-yard gain, 15-yard gain. I was just like, there was no like, oh, they just got 3 yards that play. That's a bummer. It was like consistent over and over. I don't have the number of plays, so I can't tell you how.
Well, I can tell you right now, Purdy had 34 passes, 295 yards, and then the most important part of this, 5 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence had 4 touchdowns this week after scoring 6 the week before. Trevor Lawrence has 10 touchdowns in his last 2 weeks.
Jeez,
he's getting it done rushing the ball. I think he has rushing touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 games, if not more than that. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, there you go. I mean, yeah, Brock Purdy, he averaged 11.8 yards per throw. Christian McCaffrey was at just under 5 yards per rush. So he had to have some 3-yard carries in there every now and then, but it was just over and over again. They were just moving the ball down the field very effectively. So this sets up as a great spot for Trevor Lawrence as a result.
Yeah. Probably Justin Herbert as well. He just doesn't make the list this week. Also in a must win. These quarterbacks in the AFC, so much fun this week. But as we move on to the running backs, I always remind folks, Austin's going to give you 4 options at running back and wide receiver. That way, if you want to build a full Austin lineup, you're absolutely able to. So Austin, go ahead and break down these running backs for us, some of which we've already heard about.
Yeah, some of it is just the fact that there were so many running backs that I was intrigued by this week. So I'll throw out Chase Brown and Ramondre Stevenson. First off, they were the cash considerations, but I think they also have some potential upside, especially. I think playing like Drake May stacked with Ramondre Stevenson is an interesting way to attack this week. Like we talked about in the Christmas DFS show, like building onslaught slates, stacking your quarterback with his running back as a way to get different because there's fewer players in the player pool. It kind of applies to this week 17 slate as well, with just 9 games overall. And if a bunch of games dud and it's a gross football day, but the New England Patriots pop off, you could see both of those guys getting there. We talked about Chase Brown and the potential upside there going up against the Arizona Cardinals, but a couple of guys that are new, haven't been mentioned so far on the show today. First off, you have James Cook, who I just like week over week continues to lead this team in ways that is really fascinating. I mean, Josh Allen scored me 6 points in the first week of my championship matchup last week, and I was very sad about that.
Yeah.
And part of it's because they didn't need Josh Allen. This has been a thing. Like, there was some tweet that went out, I was like, oh, this is Josh Allen's worst game since like 2019 or something like that. And it's like, well, yeah, but like they won the game. Like, it wasn't like he played poorly. This is just that the run game was really effective, and the Bills, they've been able to run the ball effectively. The Philadelphia Eagles, they've been gettable in terms of their rush defense at different times this year. We saw them get gashed on the ground by the Chicago Bears a couple of weeks, gave up over 200 rushing yards to the Chicago Bears. So this could be another situation where James Cook is set up really well and has a really good upside.
Betting on the Buffalo rushing offense in December is always a good idea. We made that joke with Derrick Henry, and that continues to look very, very true. Yeah. It continues to run that way through Buffalo as well.
And speaking of teams that gave up a lot of rushing yards to Buffalo, the New England Patriots did that a couple of weeks ago, and now they get the New York Jets and Breece Hall. And this is something that I am intrigued by doing because Breece Hall is only $5,700 on DraftKings. That is kind of a wild price when you consider the potential upside that Breece Hall has and his big play ability. And so I am very inclined to go this route, even if I do stack up the New England Patriots side and say Drake May, stack them with a receiver and a tight end, bring it back with Breece Hall. Like, I feel fine with that. Hilariously, I actually drafted a best ball team that had stacked the Patriots and the Jets for week 17. Hint, it didn't make it to week 17.
I was going to say, I don't know how well that worked out for you.
It did not. Thanks, Justin Fields, for getting hurt and benched. But Breece Hall, I think, is in a really good spot this week. And so I think at the price point and with the matchup, you could easily go there. And I think he will be very easily overlooked this week because people, I think, at this point of the season have just forgotten about the Jets.
Yeah. My pick comes from my ability to have spent a lot of time watching the games on Sunday. And one thing that became very evident is that the Pittsburgh offense runs through Kenny Gainwell, and there is literally no denying it. And for his price, $5,600 on DraftKings, $6,300 on FanDuel, this is a team that is going to lose DK Metcalf. For those that don't know, he had an altercation with a fan. He's been suspended 2 games. He's likely to appeal. At worst, or at best, he's still getting a 1-game suspension. The only question is, does he appeal now and he's able to play this week? Regardless, I don't care. They're going up against the Cleveland Browns, and if you're going to beat the Browns, you're going to beat them running the football. They seem to be doing a little bit better at certainly pass rush. I love Myles Garrett to break the record this week. But what I love about Gainwell, and they pointed it out like 800 times on the broadcast, is that he is a wide receiver playing running back. Well, guess what, Austin? They need receivers this week. So now I get a running back who caught multiple balls, 5 or 6 balls last week, who may be the team's number 1 receiver this week in a game that they have to win against a division rival who has been spotty on defense. I think we see Kenneth Gainwell play a little bit of wide receiver this week. I think they stick with the end arounds and things that I saw last week. I think he is heavily involved at this price point. There's a very good chance he pops again this week. And don't be scared by what Jaylen Warren did last week. Those were 2 huge runs at the end of the game. Gainwell was their primary back until Warren did what he did at the end of that game. So
yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really great point. I was looking at Jaylen Warren and trying to figure out, could I play him in cash this week? Because of what he did last week. But to your point, like, he didn't get a ton of volume. It was there on efficiency and touchdowns.
Yep.
I still think like there's a world in which you could also play Jaylen Warren in the tournament setting. You could kind of pick either of these running backs you want, but I love Kenneth Gainwell in this situation.
Yep. As we move on to the wide receivers, Austin, again, some names we've already heard, but at least one, actually one new name that we have. Well, no, 2. I forgot. The one guy is in my waiver article that I just wrote this morning, so that's why I thought we had already talked about him. Anyway, terrible segue into this section. Austin, take it over for the wide receivers.
Yeah, so first off, I'll just highlight Jackson Smith-Njigba again. I think he has the potential to just, again, be one of those guys that you have to have this week. That's one of my themes also for tournaments this week, is because the slate is reduced. I think playing some of the chalky, like, cash consideration players is actually a really important way to also attack tournaments this week, because it might be one of the situations where, like, you just play the best plays and the chalk is going to hit. I could see this being an easy week where the chalk hits because of there being fewer games. So I feel very comfortable playing JSN. Other player I've already mentioned is Wandale Robinson, and it's just because even though I think I feel comfortable playing him in cash, I don't know that I think other people are going to look at what happened in New York last week and get off of this team. And so I could see actually going towards him and him being lowly rostered this week. But the two guys I wanted to throw out there as cheaper plays this week, and they're a little bit like stacked and correlated with other players I've looked at. I'm first off very intrigued by Matt Collins at 4K, stacking him with Drake May this week. Now, some of this is because I've mentioned some really expensive players so far. So if you're trying to play like both James Brown or Chase Brown and James Cook, and you're trying to get Drake May in your lineup, like those are some pricey guys. And at that point, I need to save money. But Matt Collins, he's been getting really solid volume. He historically has been like this big play machine, and that's been his way of being relevant from a football and a fantasy perspective. But the past 2 weeks, he's coming off of 8 and 9 target games. We saw Stephon Diggs get a little banged up during the game this past week, so that could open up more opportunities for Matt Collins.
Well, Kayshon Boutte also got banged up, and that was a big door opener for Matt Collins. And it hasn't been confirmed that it's a concussion, which means he's very unlikely to play this week. So.
Exactly. So lots of opportunity opening up for Matt Collins, and could be an easy stack with Drake May and a cheap one at that.
Yeah, Matt Collins made my waiver article, and for this week 17 waiver article, my big focus is, can you play them this week? And in a championship scenario, on a New England team that you've already talked about the importance of this game for Drake May and this New England team, Matt Collins becomes a very important player. It also seems like Matt Collins always pops in December as well. He's obviously had some other games earlier this year, but his good games tend to coincide with Kayshon Boutte missing as well.
Yeah, nope, there you go. And then my other receiver I'm looking at here is correlating with Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's bringing back someone on the Carolina Panthers side. I'm looking at Jalen Coker, who's $4,400 on DraftKings. Really nice salary. And my thinking here is that Tedero McMillan is likely to get a lot of attention from Devon Witherspoon, and that basically like the Seahawks, their goal is going to be to prevent Bryce Young from getting the ball to McMillan, because like that's his number one guy. And I think the pass game largely goes through him. But we have seen time and time again, Bryce Young loves Jalen Coker, and I've seen him. I've watched several games because I live in North Carolina, and he loves to go after him. He gets some big chunk games with him, and so I could see this being a situation where Coker gets a lot of looks because the Seahawks are clamping down on McMillan. So he to me is a really interesting way to get different in this situation.
Yeah. Here's the thing. A lot of people were asking about Jalen Coker in week 16. I love Jalen Coker as a tournament play because when he pops, he tends to pop big. He tends to find the end zone. I'm not playing him in redraft. I'm not playing him in cash. Like, this is where Jalen Coker belongs, is where you have him. So normally I would give you pushback. I'm not going to give you pushback in this section because this is precisely where he belongs. And as you mentioned, there's very good chance they're playing from behind and need to come back in this game.
Yeah, and they have something to play for too. Like they want to stay competitive.
Let's be clear, it's them and Tampa Bay are fighting their asses off against each other right now, and they still play each other one more time. Wild that they went into yesterday's game 7-7, and they play each other twice in their last 3 games. It's going to be fun. So.
Yeah, it is going to be a wild time. I mean, it's one of those things too that if the Panthers win this week and Tampa Bay loses, like it doesn't matter what happens in that final game against the two of them. So the Panthers, they want to win because I think they want to go put themselves in the best position going into week 18 that they make it all the way there.
Yeah. At wide receiver, I started off by saying any stack with Trevor Lawrence works. If you want to go down to Tim Patrick, he had a pop game a few weeks ago. Don't do that. But I'm just saying any stack with Trevor Lawrence works right now. I think, Austin, this might be an interesting slate where you double or triple stack or onslaught this game. Because I mean, maybe not onslaught the game because I don't know who you're bringing back on the Colts side, but you go with a lot of Jacksonville Jaguars. But what's interesting to me, Austin, is you can go wide receiver and tight end, or you could go Travis Etienne and wide receiver. I wouldn't go maybe Etienne, wide receiver, and tight end. That seems like you're pushing things a little bit, but there's a lot of interesting things you can do with Trevor Lawrence. However, my player, and I'm so happy that we get to talk more about him in DFS this season because he's now done it 2 weeks in a row. Welcome back, Mike Evans. You are still wildly underpriced on DraftKings at $6,500. FanDuel caught on. They have you at $8,300 because you score touchdowns. He is very clearly the number one wide receiver that Baker Mayfield has been waiting on, plain and simple, because he has eaten the last 2 weeks. And now you get a Miami defense that just got torched by Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I think Evans comes into this game red hot. They have a lot to prove. They're still fighting for the playoffs. Everything is working out real well. I did this really funny experiment yesterday when we were talking about Emeka Egbuka kind of disappearing for the last month. Over the last 5 games, Austin, Mike Evans in just regular PPR scoring has the exact same amount of points as Emeka Egbuka. Egbuka has played all 5 of those games. Mike Evans has played 2. There is no question who Baker Mayfield loves throwing the ball to. And against Miami in a must-win game, I love every bit of Mike Evans this week.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned Jalen Waddle earlier as like he could also be a potential tournament play. Yeah. This is one of those games that I think on the surface looks like pretty gross from a game environment perspective. Let me find it real quick. It's like the over underline is like surprisingly low for these two teams, despite what I would expect for them. Yeah,
neither one of them play defense.
They're at 46.5, and so it's like I kind of would like to see. I would expect to see it a little bit higher. So for me, I could see this game easily hitting the over. And stacking up Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans and bringing it back with Jalen Waddle feels like a very easy way to build your lineup this week.
It sounds like how I will be building a lineup this week. So I'm very excited to see the possibilities. And then Austin, as we move into tight end, one guy we talked about, one guy we haven't talked about yet.
So I'll bring up Trey McBride again. I mean, I feel like in this situation, he has a really good opportunity to I could see him having like a 30-40 point game.
I agree.
And it'd be about like, were you willing to pay up for him or not? And I think that's going to be the biggest thing is people are going to want to pay up for him because here's the thing. Either people are going to play weird lineups and like try and play like Tyler Shuck and things like that so that they can play Trey McBride, or they're going to probably avoid Trey McBride because they want to play Josh Allen. If you could find a way to play both, I'm just going to throw out there, very interesting strategy to me. But even if you just do a skinny stack with Jacoby Brissett, that's totally fine as well. But to me, like he has definitely slate breaking potential this week going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. So I will be finding a way. And we talked about this on the Christmas slate. It's the way my brain thinks now because I love playing these snake draft contests. If you can't get them, if you like just feel like you can't get them pricing wise in a DFS lineup, play a snake draft and see if you can make him with your first round pick because you will need to probably use your first pick to get him and then go from there. And then you at least get access to him in your weekly portfolio. And
you're probably going to be able to easily stack with Jacoby Brissett if that's how you decide you want to build your lineup as well. Cause I feel like people are definitely off of Jacoby Brissett as of now. So
yeah, I agree with that. But if you need a cheaper option at tight end, I think Darren Waller has a ton of upside again. Coming back to that Miami-Tampa Bay game, I think this is low-key a sneaky game. And Darren Waller is, I think, going to be really interesting on the bring back. He got a lot of good volume last week. Tampa Bay gives it up to opposing tight ends. And it's one of those things, again, if he scores a touchdown, suddenly it gets a lot more interesting. He didn't last week, but I think they're using him enough that he should still be in consideration and has that upside.
Yep. You mentioned my 2 favorite plays in passing. I love Harold Fannin. I love what I'm seeing from that Browns offense. My favorite play from last week, they actually lined Harold Fannin up in a fullback spot, and he ran the ball into the end zone. This kid is going to be one of my favorite tight ends. I know it. I've been a Bowling Green fan my entire life growing up in Ohio, so I'm just very happy to see Harold Fannin. But his price matches up with his performance. So he's gotten a little bit too pricey. So I am going to lean on Brenton Strange to go with my Trevor Lawrence. This will be my favorite stack. If you don't want to do a wide receiver, I'm very okay with a Brenton Strange, Trevor Lawrence stack. He's been involved, not quite as involved as we'd like to see because, again, Lawrence is spreading the ball around. But for tight end, that works. But, Austin, we've already hit on why I love this. Indianapolis just got gashed by San Francisco. And if why am I blanking? George Kittle had not sat out the fourth quarter, we'd be talking about the amazing week that George Kittle had in this game. He got a little banged up and missed the entire fourth quarter. He was demolishing them. I think in the third quarter, I think he had 115 yards and a touchdown. So that just opens things up that the Indianapolis Colts struggle against tight ends, and I think Brenton Strange can easily take advantage of it at 4,000 on DK, just a little bit more expensive than Darren Waller. I'm with that.
Yeah, I mean, I am really with that as well. Like we mentioned earlier, I think this is a really great matchup to go after. And as you mentioned, The 49ers just gashed this team. I finally got the number pulled up. They averaged 6.8 yards per play.
Wow.
That's taking into account the fact that Brock Purdy had 9 incompletions. So, like, mind you,
I watched Christian McCaffrey get stopped for -1 yards on the last offensive play of the game.
So and also, that is actually, I should take this out.
And 3 kneel downs, Austin.
That's what I was just about to say.
Yeah.
It includes 3 kneel downs for -3 yards by Mac Jones. So let's just take out the incompletions for a hot second, because why not? That's fun.
Yeah.
When somebody was touching the ball and trying to move it forward, not just kneeling down, the San Francisco 49ers averaged 8.4 yards per play.
They were basically averaging a first down when they touched the football. Yes.
Wow.
Pick on the Colts defense.
There you go.
And do not start them as we move into our defensive picks for DFS this week. And Austin, hilariously, the 2 teams we picked are one team that people kind of associate with me, I feel like, and one team I've always associated with you. But way more importantly, these are the 2 teams I've covered for like 5 years for football guys. So hilariously, I am very in tune with these 2 defenses. I'll let you get us started. So
I mean, first off, I'm going with the Cleveland Browns because I mean, it's a divisional game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have seen these 2 teams have some very interesting late year divisional matchups. Yes. And I think the Cleveland Browns would love nothing more but than to embarrass the Pittsburgh Steelers when they're trying to win the division. And as you alluded to earlier,
exactly,
Myles Garrett is going for the sack record in this game.
1 sack.
He needs 1 sack. If I'm him, I'm thinking this is my chance to freaking stamp my name on that record for years and get 3 sacks. Like I'm sure he would get a lot of attention. And that's the other thing. People are so freaking aware of Myles Garrett right now. You watched him getting double teamed, consistently getting chip help left and right against the Bills last week. And yet Josh Allen still got sacked. Not only did he give up a half sack to Myles Garrett, but he got sacked by others on that team fairly frequently. So
he did.
To me, like, that's not just the fact that Myles Garrett is attempting to break the sack record, but the fact that his presence is opening up so much for this team. In fact, there were 2 sacks against Josh Allen, and they were focused on not making that happen. And it's Josh Allen who can run, right? Like, there's that part. The thing about good old, and they had 5 quarterback hits overall. So Aaron Rodgers, he's not running. If he sees somebody coming and about to sack him, he's going down, and it's going to be a sack. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. I'm also looking cheap. I don't know that it has the upside of the Browns, because I think you are so right about Myles Garrett just going off. The Carolina Panthers are a very interesting play to me this week. They're averaging like 6 points a week on defense. And you pointed out how few times Tennessee has went negative this season. The Panthers, who are widely regarded as one of the worst defenses in the league, which is just not true this season, has only went negative twice this entire season, and it's been a while. Then you get a matchup against Seattle, which, yes, Seattle scored a ton of points last week. They still turned the ball over like 3 times and gave up 4 quarterback sacks. The fact of the matter is Sam Darnold is still Sam Darnold. And this game is not in Seattle. It's in Carolina. And Austin, you and I have had our back and forth that Carolina is not necessarily a home field advantage, but it's not in Seattle, which is at least an away field advantage for the Seattle Seahawks. So Carolina scored 5 fantasy points against the tough Tampa Bay offense. Tampa Bay and Seattle feel very similar to me. So yes, it might be a kind of a floor play, but the fact of the matter is they're getting after the quarterback, and Sam Darnold will turn the ball over. That gives you the opportunity, Austin, to see a defensive touchdown, and Carolina has done enough that for $2,100 on DraftKings, I'm willing to put a little faith in them.
Yeah, no, I'm totally fine.
And it's a must-win game. Let's not ever wig. We've hit on this a lot. They are trying to win their division, which might be the most surprising thing I've said in 17 weeks on this show. The Carolina Panthers are in a position that if they win this week and Tampa Bay loses, the Carolina Panthers are the NFC South division winners. So
yeah, which is absolutely wild. And to be fair, when I went to that game, it was like the end of the year against the Cardinals, and there was no hope for the Panthers to do anything. And it's getting a little bit louder. I was going to actually bring that up. I'm glad you said that, because I mean, again, this is all anecdotal, but
They did a show of the game this week against Tampa Bay, and that stadium was filled. And I'm not going to say there were the noise issues we saw in some other games, but at least the fans are showing up for this team.
Yeah, they are.
All right, folks, that actually wraps up the core purpose of the show. We've already talked about cash. We've already talked about GPP. It is time to move on to the valedictorian shootout. And in the valedictorian shootout, that is going to be Austin and I playing each other in a DraftKings contest. This is just for bragging rights. We have no money. Austin, I'm on a little bit of a streak now, 3 in a row, bringing us back to 8-8. And Austin, I smashed last week, 179 points. Might be the highest we've seen. I should have went back and looked. I didn't have time. You had a great week, 124.4, but you unfortunately struggled at quarterback. You went with a weird pick at quarterback. I'm actually going to try to bring this up real quick to remind myself who you picked, because that's what killed you. Yeah, Gardner Minshew with his 1 fantasy point, and then I had that was my Joe Burrow stack, is where I talked about it on this show. So yeah, quarterback got you, and then I just got everything right. This was my best lineup of the week, and I played it nowhere because I don't typically play my Thursday lineup. Now it's a Tuesday lineup. Just to give folks a little behind the scenes, I forgot to set a lineup. We actually paused the show for me to set it, and I played it in the tournament this week, so that means it's going to do terribly. As always, Austin and I will announce my lineup first. I think we're going to have a ton of overlap. I went with Trevor Lawrence, Kenneth Gainwell, and Chase Brown. So every player on my team has been mentioned on this show. Jacoby Myers for my Trevor Lawrence stack, Mike Evans because he's my favorite wide receiver. And then I was able to fit JSN and Matt Collins into my lineup based on what your advice there. I went with Brenton Strange, so I am going with 3 Jacksonville players, which is a little risky. And then I initially went with my Carolina Panthers defense, but I had a little money left over, Austin, and I do 100% agree with you. This is going to be a great Cleveland week, so I went with the Cleveland Browns defense.
Okay. We have a little bit of overlap. So first off, I have Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. I'm sticking with him in cash. I also have Chase Brown for running back this week, but I have paired him with Tyrone Tracy, which leaves me with 4 wide receivers. I too have Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jacoby Myers, so those guys will cancel out. Yep. Where I went different for me this week is I have Adonai Mitchell and Jalen Waddle as my other quarterbacks. Nice. Or other receivers. Jeez, quarterbacks. Yeah. And then at tight end, I have Jawan Johnson. And I actually do not have the Cleveland Browns defense. I was able to spend up for the Tennessee Titans defense.
There we go. I love that worked out the way it did. That I spent up and stole your defense, and you spent up and took your cash play defense instead of your GPP defense. So yeah, I keep saying that this game was going to be the deciding factor, but we do a week 18 show and we do playoff shows. So this is probably best of 21, not best of 17. So we'll be interested to see how this plays out. And I'll remind you one last time, folks, you can play with us on both FanDuel and DraftKings, $2 contest. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, if you win, we talk about you at the end of the show. And we are talking about some Club Fantasy members. Once again, our good buddy Joel takes down the DraftKings contest. That is his 17th win of all time. We've been running these contests, I think, for 3 or 4 years now. And DraftKings lets you see how many times they've won. 17th win all time, 147 points over there. He beat me by 3 points. Why does that matter? Because Austin, for the second week in a row, I take down the FanDuel contest. Only 3 people entered. Get into the FanDuel contest, people. 139.16. That is my 3rd win of the season. 2nd win in the row. I look forward to losing to somebody this week because they're tired of seeing me win. Austin, that wraps up the week 17 episode. Let everybody know what kind of stuff you're putting out for DFS here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, so on a typical week, you can catch me and Josh Hudson breaking down the Thursday night showdown slates every Thursday. But for this week, I guess, Christmas will already happened, so don't go watch the Christmas play unless you just want to hear us talk.
See how right we are.
Yeah, see how right we are. Go do that. But then you can catch us here every Friday breaking down the DFS main slate. And make sure you stick around for the postseason this year. We're going to have some continued postseason or playoff content this year. We'll be breaking down some of the Saturday and Sunday slates for that. We'll have some showdown content, so just be on the lookout for that. But most importantly, join the listener Discord. Link to join that is in the show description. Let's help each other set our lineups, celebrate our wins, and figure out how to get better at DFS and overall just have more community in the fantasy football space.
Yeah, the Discord is growing. We're having a ton of fun over there. Like I said, we're sharing our lineups. We're sharing our wins. We want you in there with us. Link in the description of this video. If you like what you heard this week, hit that like button. If you want to hear it again next week, hit that subscribe button. We will be doing DFS shows throughout the playoffs. If you happen to be listening on Apple or Spotify, hit that follow button. We appreciate each and every one of you. Good luck in your builds this week. Unless you're playing me, we'll see you next week.